Everyone has problems, but does it ever seem that your problems seem extremely difficult or impossible to solve? We know that problems can be an underlying source or cause of depression. And so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how you can solve problems as a way of stopping depression. Hi, everyone. We know that persisting problems can be a major factor in starting and maintaining depression. These can include things like problems in relationships, problems at work, financial problems, social problems, and so on. If you're experiencing problems in major areas of your life, it's easy to understand how this can affect your mood and how this can lead to depression. So the question becomes, what can you do about this? How can you get better at solving these complex problems that may be driving your mood down? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. But before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada. And this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those things out of the way, let's start talking about problem solving in depression. Now, the thing is, everyone experiences problems in life. Problems are a difficult but unavoidable part of life. And for the most part, we readily solve most of the problems that we face in our day-to-day life. So for example, if I typically bring my lunch to work and I forget it one day, well, I can solve that problem by just going down to the food court and getting food. If I have an appointment and I leave late and I know I'm going to be late for the appointment, I can solve that problem by calling the doctor's office and letting them know I'm just going to be a few minutes late. So for the most part, these day-to-day problems are things that we address relatively simply, relatively easily. But what about more complex problems? The types of problems that involve more than one step. That's what I want to talk about in today, and I want to talk about a formula or structure that you could use to solve these more complex problems that may be having a great negative effect on your mood and maybe contributing to depression. Now, the thing is, these problem-solving steps that I'm going to be talking about, they're not rocket science, and a lot of this is common sense. But for most people with ongoing problems, having this type of framework can be really helpful to address and solve some of those more complex or sticky problems you might be experiencing. So to assist with this, let's imagine an example. Now, suppose I'm divorced and I want to get back into the dating pool again, but most of the women I'm meeting are either already in a relationship or they're just interested in a casual relationship, nothing serious. And so as a result of this, I start getting frustrated and I feel like I'm losing my self-confidence. I start to worry that I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. And this starts contributing to me feeling depressed or really unhappy about the situation. So with that problem in mind, let's think about how would I go about solving the problem? What are the steps in problem solving? Well, the first step in problem solving is defining the problem. Now, obviously this seems simple and obvious, but thinking in this example, what exactly is the problem in this situation? Is the problem that there are no available women out there? Well, if I look at it this way, if the problem is framed as due to other people or the lack of other people, that's really difficult. That makes it really challenging. If I frame the problem this way, what's the goal? Is it the goal to somehow create available women? Well, what if I define the problem that, I'm not good at dating? Well, first of all, this is an assumption, and it doesn't actually address the problem. What it does is it assumes that there's some sort of internal, unchangeable deficit in me as a person that makes me terrible at dating. And that doesn't really help me define what's actually going on or what the problem actually is. Well, what if I don't define the problem as relationships themselves? Relationships are just difficult. Well, if I frame the problem this way, that's a really vague way of thinking about it, and it can make this problem seem insurmountable. So what I need to do is to be more concrete about what the problem actually is. Is the problem that I'm frustrated and losing my self-confidence? Well, if I think about the problem this way, if I'm defining the problem like this, it's focusing on the emotion of how I feel. It doesn't actually address the problem that's causing the emotion. So this defining the problem, although it seems pretty obvious, can be a little bit challenging. So the first step can seem straightforward, but can be difficult to do. So if you don't define the problem properly, you're unlikely to be able to solve it. So that key step of defining the problem. So in this case, what can I do with regards to defining this problem? What is the problem that I'm dealing with here? Well, what you need to do is to frame the problem simply in terms of what is going on, what should be going on, and what's the obstacle between what is and what should be. So in this case, the what is that I'm not in a relationship. The what should be is that I should be in a relationship. And the obstacle is that I'm having problems meeting women who are interested in a long-term relationship. So by thinking about it this way, what I can do is I can frame the problem as, how can I meet more women who are willing to be in a long-term relationship? So that's defining the problem. So once I've defined the problem, the second step is to formulate a goal that I want to achieve. So what is the goal, the outcome that I would like? Now the thing is, I can have more than one goal in a situation and deal with each of those goals separately. The goals can be short-term, they can be long-term. But the key idea is that the goal, whatever it is concrete, and that it relates to the obstacle that's blocking the what should be from the what is in the situation. So think about some of the goals that I could set up in my hypothetical example. And again, even though this can seem straightforward, people can get tripped up on this step as well, the setting up the goal. This can be a bit of a stumbling block for people. Suppose I come up with the goal is that I want to be happy. Well, the problem is this is a really vague goal. How will I know whether I've achieved the goal of happiness? Am I supposed to be happy all the time? When and how much happiness before I've achieved the goal of being happy? That's really vague. What about if I define the goal is to feel less depressed? Well, the problem with that is that, once again, it's addressing the emotional result and not the actual problem. Well, what if my goal is to be happily married with 2 kids? Well, this can seem like a concrete goal, but it's quite long-term, and it's not particularly motivating when I won't see any of the results of my problem-solving attempts for several years. And notice, in all of these goal examples, none of them actually address the obstacle. So what would be a good goal to make in this situation? Well, things like meeting more women who are interested in a serious relationship, to meet more women who are interested in things that I like doing, such as hiking or running. Maybe the goal is to go on more dates. So, defining the goal in a sort of a concrete way that addresses the obstacle. So, once I've defined the problem and once I've defined the goal that I'm going to work towards, and that goal is to overcome the obstacle, step 3 is to come up with possible solutions. And so this step involves the notion and the concept of brainstorming. So the idea of the brainstorming step is to generate as many alternative solutions as possible to increase the chances that I am able to come up with a good solution. So again, although this may seem very simple at first glance, we know that very few people actually generate multiple solutions before making a decision when they deal with a problem. What most people do is generate the first solution that comes to their mind and then apply this solution without considering other possibilities. And we do this in part out of habit. We tend to default to solutions we've tried before because we want to speed up the problem-solving process. Nobody likes having problems. We want to deal with the problem and move on as quickly as we can. But by speeding this up, this can cause problems because we're not actually coming up with a variety of solutions. So this notion of brainstorming is really important. But the question becomes, well, how do you brainstorm more effectively? And so I like to think about 3 primary principles in effective brainstorming. So the first principle is the quantity principle. And what this suggests is that the more solutions that you can generate, the more options you will have to choose from. So the quantity principle says that you should try to come up with lots of possible solutions. I usually tell people 10 to 12 possible solutions. The more, the better. You want to give yourself lots of possible things to choose from. The second principle of brainstorming is the variety principle. The greater the variety of solutions I come up with, the more good options I will have to choose from. So this underscores the importance of being creative when generating those solutions so that I have a wide range of possibilities to choose from. So imagine in the example that we're talking about, if all I come up with is setting up a profile on Match.com, setting up a profile on Plenty of Fish, setting up a profile on Tinder, setting up a profile on Bumble. Well, I'm generating multiple solutions, sort of, but the solutions are all the same type of thing. There's no variety there. And that's why the variety principle is so important. It's important to have lots of possible options to choose from. And the third principle of good brainstorming is what I call the deferring of judgment principle. And this is a tough one because the idea is to suspend judgment of the solution ideas so that while you're coming up with the solution ideas, you're not evaluating them. And so the idea of this is that some of the solutions you come up with should be really kind of silly or far-fetched. And that's the whole point. The whole point is to think creatively and to think outside of the typical box that you tend to think of when you think of how do I address this problem. Because what this does is it can get you to think about other possible solutions that you may have never considered. And so when you're doing brainstorming, some of the solutions that you come up with, they should be out there. They should be a little kind of wacky or zany or wow, where did that come from? Because what that means is that you're allowing yourself to defer judgment and come up with random, creative, solutions that you may have never thought about. So imagine the possible list of brainstormed solutions that I could come up with in this situation. So things like I could get a dog and take the dog to a dog park to meet women. I can ask friends to introduce me to people. I could get a new haircut. I could hire a wardrobe consultant to improve my personal style. I could travel around the world to meet new people. I could give up on dating entirely. I can lower my standards for what I consider interesting women. I could take a class at a community center. I could steal my best friend's girlfriend. I could be patient and just wait for women to approach me. I could put my picture and phone number up on a billboard. I could get a gym membership. Lots of solutions, lots of things I could come up with. Now, if you're doing the brainstorming and you find that you're getting stumped trying to come up with solutions, what you can always do is ask friends or family to help you generate some ideas. Get some other people to be able to sort of get you thinking a little bit differently in terms of possible solutions. The other thing you can do is combine one or two of these different solutions to come up with an even better possible solution. So you do this brainstorming. You come up with these 10 to 12 possible solutions that have a lot of variety, and some of them are a little sort of zany or out there. Well, once you've done the brainstorming, step 4 is now the decision-making process. The goal of this problem-solving step is to select the best solution of the available options that you've come up with. So what you want to do at this stage now, not at the brainstorming stage, at this stage you want to evaluate the solutions and ask yourself the following 4 questions. So the first question is, how likely is it that this possible solution will help me reach the goal that I have set for the problem? So for example, waiting for women to approach me as a possible solution. Is that likely to work? Well, maybe, but it's not really all that active on my part, and it's probably not going to help me meet women any faster or help me with the dating process any faster. So this solution is unlikely to work. The second thing you want to think about is, if I choose this solution, how will it make me feel? And what would be the implications for me and other people? So if I go with the solution of stealing my best friend's girlfriend, well, maybe that will help me get into a long-term relationship, but how will I feel about myself for having done that? And what will be the implications for my relationship with my friend if I do that? It's probably not great. Another thing you want to think about is, how much time and effort is the solution likely to need? So the possible solution of traveling around the world, well, yeah, I'll probably meet lots of new people, lots of different people. Maybe I'll meet a lot of really interesting women, but that's going to take up a lot of time. That's going to take up a lot of money, and it's not particularly realistic as an option for me. And the fourth thing you want to consider is, do the potential benefits from this solution outweigh the potential downsides? So, for example, if I put my name and phone number and face on a billboard, well, maybe I'll get lots of phone calls from people and from women who might be interested in dating me. But there are probably going to be a fair number of downsides to that as well, because I'll probably be getting calls from lots of people who I may not be interested in. So you have these 4 criteria that you want to imagine, that you want to evaluate the possible solutions by. With the goal of this step is to try to come up with the best solution possible. Now notice, it's only the best solution, not the perfect solution, because there may not be a perfect solution. You're just trying to come up with what seems like it would meet those 4 criteria, or they'll answer those 4 questions enough that it makes it seem like this solution would actually solve the problem and address the goal. So once I've done that, once I've evaluated all the solutions, next step, step 5, is to pick the solution that I think is best and to implement the solution. This is where the rubber meets the road. You've gone through the process of generating the solution. Now you need to actually do it. And so what you want to do is to come up with a plan for how it is you're actually going to implement this solution. Because you're much more likely to carry out the solution if you have a plan for how you're going to do it. So for example, if the solution I choose is to take a class at a community center, the plan may involve a number of steps. So things like looking up the address of the nearest community center, going to the community center and getting a catalog of the courses that they offer, checking the prices of the courses and the schedule of the courses. Does it meet my budget? Does it fit in with my schedule? Am I actually able to do these courses? And then registering for the course. So what I've done is I've taken this idea of, okay, well, I'm going to take these courses at the community center, and I've created a plan for what it is that I need to do to actually implement that solution. And then once I've done all of that, the last step, and it's a step that people don't often think about, is to evaluate whether or not the solution actually worked. Did I solve my problem? So the thing is, I might carry out my solution perfectly, but how will I know if it actually worked? So this last step, this solution verification step, is really important, and it's important to set markers along the way to know whether or not I've achieved the goal, or if I'm on the right track to achieving the goal that I've set. So these markers should be concrete. They should be clear indicators that give me a sense of whether or not I'm solving the problem. So for example, in this case, I could count the number of dates I've had monthly before I started the solution, and then count the number of dates I have monthly after I started implementing the solution. If I'm getting more dates after I've implemented the solution, what that tells me is that this seems to be working. It seems to be addressing the problem, and so maybe I'm on my way to solving this problem. But if not, if I find that I'm actually getting fewer dates after I implement the solution, this is important for me to know because it gives me an opportunity to look back and see where the problem solving may have gone awry. Well, maybe I didn't define the problem. Maybe I didn't define the problem properly. Maybe I didn't do enough brainstorming. I look back and I see, well, I only came up with a few solutions and they're all kind of the same thing. Maybe there were other solutions I could have picked that would have been more effective. Maybe the solution I picked would have been effective if I actually implemented it, but looking back on this process, I realized I actually didn't engage in the solution that I had come up with. So that solution verification step is really important to give me a sense of, is it working? And if it's not working, where do I go back to fix it? And what can I do now to engage in new problem solving to address this problem? So those are the 6 steps in problem solving. And I know this can seem artificial and formulaic, but I guess for me, that's the whole point. Because if your natural tendencies for how you solve problems were working, then you probably wouldn't have problems contributing to depression. You would be solving those problems. But what I like about these 6 steps is that it gives a person a sense of structure, a step-by-step approach for dealing with problems that might be contributing to depression and giving a person the best chance possible to solve those problems. It takes these problems that have been sticky and challenging and difficult, and it gives me a formula or a recipe to try and follow to help me solve those problems as efficiently and hopefully as successfully as possible. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that it's probably a lot of review for people, but I hope it gives maybe a new structure or a new idea or a new way of thinking about solving problems. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas about this, so please leave me some comments in the comments section down below. If you've been enjoying my videos and would like to see more, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll be alerted every week when I post a new video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.